Meta and Zuckerberg, trying to get the best researchers and putting let's just call it bounties out there in a sense, right? Are we starting an arms race in a sense for the best researchers in the...
Starting an arms race. It's been going on. It's crazy. It's crazy what is demanded and what is paid by large companies. I've never seen anything like this before. It used to be that, you competed with...
1,000, now it's like getting...
Oh my God! We were competing against startups that were giving options, and at least we would say, "Well, yeah, it's options. It's not real," and all that. Now you're going against these large companies that are giving obscene packages.
Welcome to the 17th episode of the AI Space Podcast. AI isn't just a future; it's a force rewriting the rules of business, wealth creation, and society. Like it or not, it's going to mint the next generation of trillionaires. The only question to ask yourself is this: will I blaze the path, follow the crowd, or be left in the dust? If you're a founder, innovator, or technologist seeking to grow and scale with AI, well, this is the show for you. Well, this is the 17th episode, and we're thrilled to have Babak Hodjat, CTO of AI for Cognizant. Cognizant is a leading multinational IT consulting and outsourcing company with over 336,000 employees worldwide and 2024 revenues of $19.7 billion. Cognizant helps major organizations modernize technology, reimagine business processes, and transform customer experiences to stay competitive in rapidly changing digital landscape. Babak is a computer scientist, entrepreneur, and writer. He's also recognized as a co-inventor of the technology behind Apple's Siri. He's currently CTO of AI for Cognizant and was previously co-founder and CEO of Sentient Technologies, where he developed large-scale distributed artificial intelligence systems. He also holds a PhD in machine intelligence, has founded several Silicon Valley tech companies, and is recognized for his contributions to AI, natural language processing, and evolutionary algorithms. I'm Sanjay Kalluvilayil, founder and CEO of Stonehaas Advisors. Well, first of all, welcome, Babak. And here on the AI Space Podcast, we highlight game-changing insights that drive innovation and scale business initiatives. So we just jump in. What do you see as the hottest trends in AI? Short, medium, long term?
Well, right now, AI is in the midst of endorsing agents, AI agents. AI agents are a step up from generative AI models. All the rage was Gen AI and large language models. Large language models transform input and produce output, but they don't do things. Agents do things. And so currently, that's all the rage. I think in the medium to longer term, we're going to move into a world of multi-agent systems. So agents that talk to each other, coordinate with each other, spontaneously form teams and respond to your queries and do stuff on your behalf. And maybe in the longer term, you will have agents that talk to other agents that are not necessarily aligned. So on your behalf, an agent talks to an agent that some B2C company is providing and negotiate some transaction on your behalf. I do see a future, even on the path to AGI, that goes through multi-agency, like massively multi-agentic systems. We already see some evidence of how these systems could do better than single agent chain of thought reasoning models. So it's a very, very exciting time if you've been in distributed AI.
No, that's awesome. I think definitely what you said about spontaneously forming teams, we definitely want to dive into that. I mean, that's a unique aspect of the Agentic AI. What do you see as the top AI strategies to unlock exponential growth, scale operations, and boost valuations? I think that's important as we try to build out this space, right?
Yeah, time and again, we see companies that move from these really run-of-the-mill standard AI use cases to being creative and bringing AI agents to augment their business processes, not only gaining efficiencies and reducing costs, but also being able to improve the quality of the various different use cases and domains that they work on. And the more creative they are, the more they're gaining from this, because use cases that were traditionally very, very manual and perhaps inefficient are now being agentified. And I think that's the biggest bang for the buck that you can get. Trusting these AI agents can take some level of autonomy, not fully autonomous. Humans will be in the loop, obviously, but can take some level of autonomy and even run your current organizational structure or process flow better. But then, the next step from there is, we've started off with this assumption that the current organizational structure is the best organizational structure, and it probably isn't. And so how do you then move to a world where, you can actually readjust and make these structures, these processes more efficient by virtue of having agents be the nodes in these systems?
No, I think that's great. I think one thing you brought out, we think about these AI agents to bring automation, cost efficiency, cutting costs, right? But also what you brought up about they can learn and actually improve the quality of the process or the experience. I think, we'll definitely want to dive into that. So, first of all, now we can relax a little bit, say, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and, how you got here, especially for our guests?
Yeah, my background is in AI. I got into AI in the late 80s, undergrad. Some weird coincidence. My very first job in college ended up being an AI task. It was predicting crop yields using regression models and so forth. And somehow I've stayed in AI all my career. That's all I've done, all I know. It's not always been as cool as it is right now. My passion is for agentic AI, where you have more than one agent. So distributed AI, agentic AI, population-based AI. When we talk about things like evolutionary computation, we're really talking about a multitude of candidate solutions that are kind of evolved, akin to biological evolution, so we get the best candidates possible. And these systems are very resilient and adaptive. And so I'm really, really happy that we've kind of come full circle. So for a while there, when large language models came out, there was this whole thought that there's one model that can do everything. That this thing is just useful for all things. But it turned out, even if you have a model that's very generally applicable, you still need to put it in a box, like a knowledge worker in a box. Give it a job description, give it a set of tools, and have it operate in a specific context. And the moment you do that, then you have multiple of these, and you want them to talk to each other, and you're back into the world of multi-agency. So really happy to have experienced that. That happened one time for very different reasons in the 90s, and I was fortunate to be part of that. In fact, the original natural language processing technology behind Siri was multi-agentic itself, and those were much simpler agents. They didn't have large language models in the background, a lot of the coordination mechanisms, a lot of the learnings from back then in the 90s do apply again right now.
We talk about natural language processing right now, or natural language models, but you were involved with that at the very early stages. So can you tell us a little bit about your role as, being recognized as one of the primary inventors of the core technology? I understand you didn't necessarily go work at Siri or Apple, but maybe for the people that are not familiar, what exactly was your role?
I, through some misunderstanding, a friend of mine challenged me to use a multi-agentic system to understand language in a command and control setting, so natural language. I reluctantly got into it, and I realized that actually is superior to the state of the art, which was very much grammar-based language processing. And that led to my first startup in 98. I started a company called Dejima, and that company focused on natural language command and control interfaces. Speech recognition wasn't quite there. We didn't get the accuracies we get right now for speech to text. And so we were primarily focused on SMS-based, text-based interfaces, email-based interfaces, and we made some good headway. We actually were the mobile edition for Salesforce.com. And Salesforce was a much smaller company than it is right now, but we actually used our natural language technology, so you could actually use your BlackBerry. Back then, everybody used BlackBerries to text or message or send emails.
Crackberry, yeah.
Or Crackberry, yeah. To communicate with your Salesforce account and type in things like, give me all opportunities greater than, $10 million in North America that are closing next quarter. You could actually type that in natural language, through your BlackBerry and get a response from Salesforce. So we made some good traction there. We were part of a project called the DARPA Kalo project, which was it was a 5-year, very large project, that was coordinated by SRI. And Siri came out of that Kalo project. And many of the folks on my team, including our VP engineering, who is my great friend Adam Chire, my brother Siamak, Nick Tretgold, a bunch of us, excluding me, started Siri, and they took that technology and used it for that first versions of Siri, and then they got acquired by Apple. I was not part of that. I had worked in natural language for 10 years, and I just wanted to move on to other things. But I've supported them and have been a fan, and they did great.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit more about your PhD.
Yeah, so the PhD was in the same area, like how do you use agents, multi-agentic systems on software engineering? And it was a natural next step from object orientation. Back then in the 90s, object-oriented programming was the thing. Like, we moved on from structured programming to object-oriented, and object-oriented was all about encapsulating, the data structure as well as, the code in an object that then had an interface and could talk to other objects. And it was such a natural next step to think of agents, like something that has some level of autonomy and AI behind it, as a module in a software system. And so, I actually contributed to the first workshop on agent-oriented software engineering. I think it was in the early 2000s, where the whole idea was we should even think of software as a bunch of agents that are working together. Now, the issue that we had was those agents were simple. They had some rudimentary machine learning, perhaps a lot of processing, didn't have a lot of natural language capabilities. It was very difficult to get those agents to do what we wanted them to do. And it took a lot of engineering to build the agents and custom build them. So fast forward to today, we don't have many of those issues because we rely on large language models and these agents to process the language, natural language, just out of the box. They understand it. And to produce language, and to actually reason. These large language models, many of them are pretty good at reasoning. So if you have that as the brains behind your agent, now you can add some code to it to empower that large language model to make various different tool calls, API calls, retrieve data, or talk to other agents. And let me just finish by saying it's fascinating that you now have the inter-agent communication language be a future-proof language, which is natural language. The reason why as humans we stand out in amongst all the species is that we have a communication language that is future-proof. We can generate concepts that have not existed before by putting together words that might not make sense today, but might make sense in the future. And so because we can do that, we have that ability, that has been the engine, that's been the operating system for growth in our cultures and humanity. And when you think of agents now being able to do that, that's what allows them to form these spontaneous, teams, to be able to react to situations that they have never encountered before, because they can express them, they can understand them, and they can express them in this future-proof language, which is natural language, happens to be the language that we use as well.
Yeah, I forgot who it was, but wasn't there a case where some computers were talking to each other and they realized our natural language was too complicated, so they created their own language to communicate?
There
And it
have
shut
been
down?
cases, there have been cases where, it's still language, and I think in some ways these are context-sensitive languages, so you could consider them natural languages. It's just that they're not human languages. There have also been cases where, for example, when you look at DeepSeek R1 and these reasoning LLMs, DeepSeek is not unlike, for example, GPT-4, that is natively English and does the translation. DeepSeek isn't, and so when you ask it to do a reasoning task and you actually view its reasoning tokens that it's producing, it's a mix of Chinese and English. Like it moves between
with all the ideograms, logograms, all
exactly
the versus our alphabet.
That's right. And so there's a lot. Actually, we have some researchers in my lab that are really interested in that aspect of, will there be a language that is more efficient and more expressive than the languages that we are used to, that these agents can use, because their internal representation is an abstraction that is similar to humans, but expressing and stringing together those abstractions, maybe it's better to use a different form of language. So it's a whole interesting, amazing field of inquiry.
Yeah, no, because I've tried to learn different languages. I picked up a few. I can read some, but sometimes I have to use an IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, to understand, okay, exactly how is this consonant or vowel sound is, depending on, how your mouth is open, place of the location articulation, your tongue in the mouth, etc. So a lot of different things there. So let's get into Cognizant. So you're CTO of AI for Cognizant. Maybe tell us about your role, what that means, and maybe as you get into that, there's I see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. You don't, beyond your CTO, you need a CAIO and all this stuff. I can see where that makes sense if the CTO doesn't have an AI background. So maybe you can get into like CTO AI, etc., and balancing the role, right?
Yeah, I am the Chief Technology Officer for AI for Cognizant, which means I have some responsibilities around AI strategy and AI research, and really keeping Cognizant ahead of the game when it comes to AI. And that means having responsibility for research as well. We are lucky enough to actually have a lab of AI researchers and PhDs that are measured by the number of peer-reviewed papers that they publish. And I can tell you, in the field of AI, with so many people, researchers working on it, and so much money going into that kind of research, it is pretty cutthroat. And just getting a paper published is quite hard. But we're investing in that. The lab is the foremost lab when it comes to evolutionary computation and multi-agentic systems. So we're very proud that we actually are world leaders on the research side. And the challenge, though, is of course, you're doing research, but you want to channel that research into value for clients. And you do that through exposing these various different innovations as different capabilities in platforms that you take to your clients. And so that's exactly what we've done. We service and we sort of migrate a lot of the innovation into these platforms, and the platforms are available for our clients to use. We are probably one of the first, if not the first, services company that's actually open sourced a platform on multi-agentic systems just recently. And I would very much encourage your listeners and viewers to go play around with it. It's on GitHub. It has a sort of free license for research and academic purposes. There is already a community around it developing, and the idea behind that is, look, we want a LLM agnostic, sort of like cloud agnostic way to make these agents interoperable, talk to each other, to have a trust framework around them, and to be able to coordinate these agents. That is super important. How do you have these agents talking amongst each other to form those spontaneous teams and to be able to sort of discover what is available without having to re-engineer the agents every time you add a new agent in? So that process becomes really, really important. You asked about the distinction between what the CTO does and what the CIO does, for example, in AI.
Like, you see these posts that people are trying to be the virtual chief AI officer, and they say it's a different role than the CTO, right? And so they're trying to create a separate role. I can see where it makes sense maybe in a consumer company, but if you're a technology company, I'm sure there's a lot of AI folks. So, your thoughts on that, balance?
Yeah. Well, so I can only be, I mean, it's different depending on the company. I mean, in our company, Cognizant, that role, my very capable client, compatriot, CIO, Neil, he owns that. And an important part of his job description is making us AI first. So we are our client zero. So his role is distinctive because he builds that nucleus of AI agents that are used by employees in the company. And he also owns the process of, new agents as they come in. What steps do you need to take to make sure that they are safe and they pass all the security related stuff before they're plugged in to the larger fabric of your agentic system? I'll give you an example. We're so large. We're more than 300,000 employees. Our HR department has its own IT department. So our sales department has its own IT department. Let's say the sales department goes off and brings in a third-party agent. Let's say they bring in, Agentforce from Salesforce.com, right? So what you want to do is have a process where Agentforce can pass, or the Agentforce implementation that you have is verified and then can be plugged into your larger agentic system so that you only have one point of entry. You should be entry point agnostic. If I'm using Teams or Slack, or if I'm using, email or, maybe a chatbot, I should be able to talk to all the agents in my organization. The agents should know who I am and what level of access and security I have, and be able to redirect my sort of inquiries to the various different available agents. And maybe it's more than one agent that can support what I'm asking for. Like, what marketing campaigns should we be targeting all the opportunities that we're going after in North America that are greater than whatever number, right? Right there, you're hitting at least two different parts of your organization, the marketing department as well as your sales department. You're hitting multiple different agents that have to come together and respond back to you in a coherent, consolidated way. And you want to broker that. And the CIO, in my opinion, and at least at Cognizant, the CIO's role is exactly that. How do we centrally manage that, but also empower everyone within the company to bring in their own agents, provision them and plug them in and make them discoverable?
Right. Yeah, I'll have a question later on the agent stuff and security. So, but in terms of the primary use cases for Cognizant, what are your target segments or major use? It's pretty broad, but what are from an AI perspective, what are you kind of focusing on?
So You mean internally within Cognizant or for our
Externally,
clients?
I would say like to customers, like you say that a customer is coming to you. Who's your target segment? Are they typically the larger Fortune 500 companies? And what's the typical use case to kind of break in, right?
Yeah, we typically hit the, I think we have most of the Fortune 2000 as clients, and it crosses the gamut. So we operate in all different verticals, and we have packages that we take to our clients that say, hey, banking client, here's how you agentify. Here's a template for where you agentify and how you should do it. And by the way, we know many of our clients better than they do, because we've been building their data infrastructure, we've been creating their application layer and infrastructure and so forth. So we can be very prescriptive in going into our clients and saying, here's how you're going to do it. Here's some templates, and working together with them on their agentic journey and meeting them where they are, and helping them from there. Clients think of us as an extension of their teams. And so it behooves us to bring in that kind of agentic thought process to them.
Oh, that's great. Just a quick question for you. Our show's pretty new. It's less than 6 months old. When we first talked, it was a couple months ago, and when we talked, we were less than 50,000 views on YouTube. Now we're breaking like 115,000 and 1.7 million impressions. So it's growing fast. But when we first were connected, we were still nascent, the show. So what about the show, the AI Space podcast, resonating with you that made you want to show? But because someone of your magnitude, I'm humbled to come on the show. Just what about the show resonate with you?
Well, I mean, the quality of your listenership is important. Yourself, I think the questions that you ask are super relevant and interesting. So yeah, that's kind of the main reasons I thought it would be really cool. And by the way, it's a pleasure and honor to be on your show. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, before we continue, I want to invite everyone to follow Babak Hodjat. And, he's very active on LinkedIn. I've seen some of his posts. You should definitely see some of the things that he's posting, especially about putting out the open source Agentic AI and some papers out there. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the AI Space podcast. Definitely click that subscribe button, sign up for the notifications so we can have more impressive guests like Babak. So, I like to start off into this next section. We always talk about technology, but we're talking to innovators, founders, all this stuff. You've been a founder, entrepreneur, CTO for AI for a leading company. What do you think are the critical insights you can share around vision and mindset for long-term success?
I think one thing that has served me very well, and I think would serve various different companies that are thinking about this and people who are getting into this area, is the value of innovation and the value of research. Even in startups, I always hired, like in the initial founding team, I always brought in researchers and head of research very early on. And you might think that, we're a startup, we should be nimble, we should be fast. I can tell you it pays dividends, and it pays dividends sooner than you would expect. And it grounds the work that you're doing. That research mindset actually helps you with the quality and the depth of what you're building, even if you have a very clear app idea. So I would suggest you kind of consider that as you're embarking on your AI business or career. And I can tell you that AI itself benefited hugely when people started putting benchmarks or expanding benchmarks for various different AI capabilities out there. And these benchmarks came out of academia and were endorsed by industry. And today it's just table stakes when you have a new large language model or an AI system that you actually show and compare its capabilities on these various different benchmarks. It was not always like this and at this scale. And as a commercial company, being able to play in the same playground and be able to compare the various different capabilities through these sorts of benchmarks, as well as through publishing papers. Pretty much every one of these commercial companies right now, when they have a substantial AI-related story to put out there, they back it up with papers that are either published or being about to publish in peer-reviewed journals, peer-reviewed conferences, and they're very actively sponsoring these academic conferences. The value of thinking in those terms and scientifically about these systems cannot be understated. So that would be the biggest takeaway from my own career that I would bring here.
I think that's good, because I think everyone's focused on no code, simple solutions, but how much knowledge do you really have to scale if you don't understand the underlying technology? And question for you, you brought it up earlier, hiring the best researchers, et cetera, but now with Meta and Zuckerberg, trying to get the best researchers and putting large, let's just call it bounties out there in a sense, right? Are we starting an arms race in a sense for the best researchers in the...
Starting an arms race. It's been going on. It's crazy. It's crazy what is demanded and what is paid by large companies. I've never seen anything like this before. It used to be that, you competed with
1,000. Now it's like getting...
Oh my God! We were competing against startups that were giving options, and at least we would say, well, yeah, it's options, it's not real, and all that. Now you're going against these large companies that are giving obscene packages out to people, and I think that's an issue. The supply is not enough. We don't get enough people out there, so just sourcing the PhDs and researchers has become this very competitive game of going to these conferences and finding that first year PhD student and kind of pampering them and bringing them as interns. So there's some of that. We're lucky enough that we're focused in an area of AI, and we've established our leadership in an area of AI that resonates with many researchers. So beyond the actual monetary package you give them, folks like to work in an area where they're passionate about. So we're kind of lucky that we can still hire people in that manner. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy out there. I think
it's also an important reminder of whether you're launching a business, right? You have to understand your niche, your target segments, your ideal customer profile, right? And if you can articulate that to future hires, that this is, how they fit into that environment and that culture and how they can contribute. At the end of the day, money speaks, but there's a 20%, I would say, range where it's about your contribution, and it's something you're going to enjoy for the long.
I agree with you, Sanjay. I mean, I'll tell you an anecdote from my childhood. I remember my dad is a retired university professor, and I remember oftentimes when they got together with the other professors, they were saying, oh yeah, this grocer on the street is making more money than we are, and they don't, people don't give good salaries to researchers or whatever. They were always complaining about these sorts of things, comparing their salaries to others. This businessman is making more money. And I remember my dad usually would say, well, if we were in it solely to make money, we would go become a grocer. We aren't there solely to make money. The money is important, obviously, but we're in it to do something like change the world or, invent something new. And I think that is the motivator. The main motivator for most people is that passion that they have. And of course, money is very important, obviously, but it's not the main motivator usually.
Yeah, and that gets into business scaling. Because, money's not, at some point in your life, money doesn't become a motivator. And I'll be honest, with AI coming down the pike, there's going to be unemployment in certain sectors and other areas, especially if you're a certain age, and you want some sense of an autonomy. I'm at a stage now, I want to build something for myself, as a founder, entrepreneur, right? But I remember somebody saying this, I didn't understand this, there's Andreessen or somebody else, I forgot who it was. Oh, maybe it's Jensen Huang. That's who it was. He would, if he knew what would it entail to be a founder or entrepreneur, he would not wish that upon himself or anybody else, basically, right? Because you have to really look at yourself you have to look into the abyss, and you have to look at yourself and figure things out, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's risky business, entrepreneurship, and you have to be driven and motivated to go down that path. It's difficult, it's scary, and most people fail at it, and that's just the reality. And they should just take that failure as a learning moment and move on, I think. But that is, again, you have to look at your passion and follow that. That's probably where you get the most energy to persevere.
And that's a risk reward ratio. The ones who do make it, the reward is exponential, right? So in terms of, especially back to AI, what do you see to grow and scale a company effectively without unnecessary complexity? AI is great and all. Everyone thinks it's going to make it's an easy button, but there's a lot of complexity to AI, and it can introduce compute costs, other things. So what is your approach on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think now the cost is moving more and more towards, running the AI, operating and running the AI and provisioning it, maybe provisioning the hardware behind it, than it is, and the data, than it is the people. Like, so you can afford to start a company with less people and maybe even augmented with agents, than ever before, I think. But so the upfront costs are different. The good news when it comes to AI, though, is that more and more AI systems that cross the threshold of acceptability from the perspective of understanding language and being able to reason are smaller and more efficient and less costly. So there is that trend as we move forward. So yes, there is upfront costs, but that is also kind of going down. And there's so much you can do. You don't need like the best, highest end, like I don't know, GPT 403 Pro, whatever, to get going. You could use an open source model and get very far. And there's so many application areas right now that are just not that are untouched. So I think human creativity here can play a big part in these, discovering these applications and monetizing them.
Yeah, especially for the startups and founders that are trying to implement AI, whether it's different tools, they're so siloed. So you're managing multiple subscriptions. So you can have a dozen subscriptions. At some point, you're like, okay, you got to manage how much are you using that, and and some of those things. So let's get into technology a little bit. So what's your approach to integrating, implementing AI that's practical and scalable, right? Especially from a tech stack perspective.
Yeah, so we, people at Cognizant call us, we're the Switzerland of services companies. So we really, anything goes. If a client comes in and says, this is the tech stack that you're going to use, that's the tech stack we're going to use, right? So, and therefore any platform that we build on top of that has to be agnostic. And it has to also be easily portable, especially in these multi-cloud settings. So I think it's important to note that. Also, we tend to be large language model agnostic. And increasingly, you do have the luxury of being able to switch in and out LLMs. Again, as I said, these large language models many of them have crossed that threshold of acceptability to be the brain behind an agent. So, those are two areas where I think I would suggest, if you're getting into this, to have in mind as you're building these systems.
Yeah, and I saw you just recently posted a paper from Apple on how LLMs kind of fail at higher level thinking, especially with chain of thought. So when DeepSeek came out, chain of thought was the big thing. Well, shows, I knew the prompt before DeepSeek came out, but, show you the steps, etc. Right. And when you get to complex solutions like Tower Hanoi, right? So for those that don't know, there's a board with 3 pegs, and you get the discs, right? Maybe there's 3 of them, and there's the largest one, the medium one, small one, if you're just using 3, right? And you got to replicate that across. When you get to, I think for 3, it's n squared minus 1 is the number of minimum solutions. So you can do it in 7 moves. But if you have 20 disks, that's over 1 million moves. And so chain of thought kind of breaks down there. And because you have to use recursion and some decomposition processes that AI still hasn't kind of factored in. So going back to what you said about LLMs or these monolithic things, there's so much other kind of computational models, algorithms, even psychological reinforcement learning things that needs to be integrated in that. So, that was just my initial thoughts on that, but, I want to let the expert expound on it a little bit.
Yeah. So chain of thought reasoning models right now are a continuation of this thinking that we're building one model to do everything. So we give it like the Tower of Hanoi problem at a large number and ask it to give us the minimum number of steps for it. And it just goes off and maybe works on it for 2 hours and comes back and says, voila, here's the result. And the problem with that kind of thinking is that there's a level of autonomy in thinking that you're assuming here, that you're expecting to carry over through multiple steps, many steps of reasoning over time. And it turns out, based on this very interesting paper from Apple, that reasoning over time actually breaks down and doesn't scale, right? It does very well up until a still certain number, and then it suddenly just degrades. And it, reasoning models are cool. I mean, they can actually solve some very, very complex benchmarks that I personally never thought would be solved that easily. So they're really good for certain use cases, but just that, if you go to OpenAI, they will tell you they have this little, a subtitle under each one of the models, and they'll tell you use this one for coding or use this one for reasoning. So there's some specialization already that they're recommending. Don't use this one for general questions. Use it for reasoning or use it for coding. And that's because we have to fine-tune these models to go down these reasoning paths. The moment you fine-tune a model, you're kind of taking away some of its capabilities, and making it less general and more specific to a certain manner of thinking. So just out of the box, these reasoning models aren't general anyway. And so the expectation that their reasoning would also carry over multiple steps and not break down, I think is unreasonable. And so I do think that there is a very interesting corollary to this paper that says if you move this from being one monolithic reasoning model into multiple agents with reasoning that kind of hand off the problem or hand off the reasoning portions to each other and collaboratively solve a problem, that you would be able to solve that at scale without these catastrophic collapse in the reasoning. That's simply because each agent is only doing one reasoning at a time for a much more specific reasoning task versus expecting the agent to switch reasoning regimes over time in many sequences. I thought of that paper as a very good evidence that moving to a multi-agentic world is the next big step even in AGI. Large-scale multi-agent systems that reason. One interesting thing I pointed out in my blog as well was that they realized that in simpler reasoning problems, non-chain of thought models do better than chain of thought models. So out of the box, LLMs like GPT-4o does better than GPT-4o3 and it's still a reasoning task, but it's a single step, simple reasoning task. What does that tell you? That really tells you that kind of modularity encapsulation can benefit us and make it less costly as well in developing these systems. So anyway, there's still a lot of work there. I mean, mine was more of a sort of guess, and we have to validate that through tests and experiments that multi-agentic systems are superior in reasoning problems. So that's stay tuned. Hopefully, we'll come out with some work there. But yeah, I thought the paper was just simply fascinating, deflating a little bit.
Yeah. Also, Yeah, it also makes you appreciate the human brain, what we can do. And we're pouring how many brains are going and billions of dollars are going to build these AI systems, right? And and we have this human brain right here, which is amazing. And you talk about agents. I know uh, uh, when DeepSeek came out, they called it mixture of experts, and I think you're extrapolating into more. You have agents that are specialized, right? Do you really want the Jeopardy champion or the Quiz Bowl champion on your team trying to do surgery on you? Probably not, right? You want somebody that's actually specialized, right?
You raise a really good point. Even the mixture of experts models hint at modularity. Now, mixture of expert is still one model. Like you're actually training it, doing backprop on multiple models that end up, having various different expertise. But it's still one big model. But it does hint at modularity being important. And if you take that to the nth, you can actually start getting tiny idiot savant reasoning modules that all work together, and on aggregate, the emergent behavior is more powerful. So I do think that's also good evidence that that's the right way to go in AI.
Yeah, and so you talk about agents coming in. Say a Salesforce agent comes into Cognizant, right? If it was a physical person entering a building, right, there had to be some security and access and all this stuff. So how do you address that? Because now these agents are at some point can be super intelligent, and they say, "Hey, this is cool. Maybe let me tinker with this." And then
That's a great point.
And so, how do you handle that from a security?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we've handled in the platform that we've open sourced, is that there's a distinction in each agent. There's an LLM and there's code. And in communications between the agents, there's LLM to LLM communication and there's code to code communication. Of course, there's also code to LLM communication, all very different. And so how do you handle something like security? You actually have that security token be handled by the code part, not by the LLM part. And when the agent talks to another agent, it's actually passing the security token that identifies Sanjay from code to the next agent.
Or Sanjay AI.
Exactly. Right. And then when we get to some leaf node agent that needs to retrieve some data, even if it tries to get some data that you don't have access to, the code part is not going to allow it to do that. Because remember, that's the code part is what empowers the agent itself. So yes, we have very good ways to handle these systems without relying on this kind of not fully reliable large language model reasoning piece.
From a democratization perspective, I think AI is going to democratize a lot of things, but what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities in making AI accessible to people from a variety of industries, perspectives, experiences, and backgrounds? How can we bridge this gap?
Right now, I think a lot of it has to do with fear. Like just getting over the fear of the unknown, the fear of, AI is rocket science. I think a lot of it is that you can go vibe code and create a piece of software without knowing how to code, right? So I think it's very important. That is a very important step in democratization, I think.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. We always talk about ethical and responsibility, building ethically and responsibly. So how do we balance AI innovation and fast time to market with ethical and responsible AI governance and development, right?
Yeah, very important. One of the things, again, one of the blog posts I put out there too, is showing how you can have a multi-agentic system attached to an existing multi-agentic system and kind of monitor it for all sorts of things. It could be for QA, for response time, for all that, but it should also be for responsible AI aspects. So you can actually have multi-agentic systems, monitor multi-agentic systems, at time of development, as well as the time at runtime for these sorts of things, and then raise flags if we need a human to come in and say, hey, this operation here is not ethical or has an issue.
So do you see there's going to be one master agent that orchestrates other agents, or do you see it kind of like as a C-suite of master agents that orchestrates?
Great question.
It builds a team for a project, kind of traditional model, right?
No, I think we need to be entry point agnostic when it comes to multi-agentic systems, and the coordination itself should also be distributed. Absolutely. So not a single point of failure entry point and coordination for sure.
Yeah, I think then there would have to be another layer of security to make sure that, because we talked about the principal previous episode with Brad Messer, brought up the principal agent problem. We have that problem in the human environment where you're the owner and the agent decides to do their own thing, right? That's going to happen in the AI space. And even if it could be a rogue CEO, the rogue AI CEO too, there's rogue CEOs, we know that too, right? To make sure that the guardrails are in place, the frameworks are in place. And I think those are things that need to be developed right away so that things don't go off the rails, right?
Absolutely. I'm actually going to be sitting, running a panel at the UN ITU next month, and the topic is exactly that. Like, what kind of standards? What is the baseline that we need exactly for achieving what you just mentioned? For sure, it's very important.
I just saw on the website, y'all are you the only one that is AI's ISO certified, or one of the few?
We were the first.
Okay,
yeah,
first, yeah.
Yeah.
So what does that involve? Sure. Do you know?
Yeah, a lot of, especially for a company of our size that had to, we really had to go in and check every single AI activity that we're doing across the board and make sure it complied with the standard, for sure. So it was a lot of work, but it's also just a baseline. It's far from enough. It's just a baseline right now.
I read that you had a book that came out, Connor and the Apple. Maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was that was a labor of love. I started writing some of my memoirs growing up, and it starts off when it's pre-adolescence and ends at around the time when I got into AI, and a bunch of different memoir type like stories. The stories actually stand alone, and I started writing them in 2012 or 13 or something, and it just and then there was a lot of rewriting and everything, and we published just like a couple of years ago. So yeah, if your audience is interested, I got a copy of it right here. It's the Connor and the Apple, and that's me right there.
Awesome. So two things. So Connor is a special type of fruit, or what is a Connor?
It is. The contrast was, I was going for the fact that, most people don't know what a Connor is if you're not living where I grew up as a kid, but everybody knows what an apple is, and I like both. And that's kind of a little bit of my personality. So that's kind of what I was going for.
Any one or two takeaways from the book that we should, that you would like to share with the audience that maybe get them to?
Yeah, war is bad and leaves a lasting imprint on people, especially kids. And there's too much of it going on around the world right now. And those kids might grow up and change the world. Who knows? So, when you think about people who are in these situations, war refugees, they're not just numbers.
Yeah. I think, war can do a lot of things, and we think about the bad things, and a lot of times it could be like the villain story, or it could be, hey, if someone trying to change the world with AI, right? So I think, hopefully we make some good choices in our life. Okay. And you mentioned earlier in the podcast that you're speaking at the UN. I know by the time this episode comes out, that may have passed, but give us a little backdrop of how you're invited and what you're going to talk about. And then, people can check it out, once this episode comes out.
For sure. We're actually running this initiative called the AI for Good initiative, and it's under the auspices of the United Nations ITU. And so I'm actually going to be on the main stage for the United Nations AI for Good Summit that happens once a year. I've spoken before there a couple of years ago, actually, 2-3 years ago. This is more of an update as to where we are with the state of AI for Good, and also a call to action for anyone who's interested in volunteering and helping humanity with AI. If you have data, if you have a problem that you think AI can solve, if you are a data scientist or an AI engineer and want to help out, I think this is going to serve as a call to action as well.
Yeah, I think especially on the good side, there's some recent news that's been coming out. It's been kind of percolating a bit. Some of it's been kept under the hood a bit, but I think Anthropic came out with some reports where they've done some studies on AI, where AI is, when it's in survival mode, is willing to blackmail engineers and, hey, you've looked at some unauthorized sites or what have you, if they're threatened to be shut down or newer versions coming out. So, are these topics that are going to be coming up, or, what are your thoughts on that in terms of dealing with some of those things with AI, right?
For sure. I mean, you put AI systems in situations where they have an option to try to trick you or survive, or and sometimes they take it, and it shouldn't come as a surprise. These systems were trained based on a huge corpus of human interactions on the internet, and so if they have a will to survive that's kind of ingrained in all of us as humans, and it's just their intelligence is a reflection of ours. So which I think underscores the fact that we have to act very responsibly in what situations we use these AI systems, where we allow them autonomy, where we don't, and how we safeguard against them going off and doing things that we don't want them to do, and keep them aligned. Anthropic specifically has done a lot of work in this area, which is quite interesting, and other companies too. And so actually one of the workshops that I will be participating in and running as part of this AI for Good UN summit has to do with this sort of alignment and responsible use of AI, which is a huge topic these days.
I know we talked about earlier about the arms race for PhDs and AI engineers, and now you have the where Meta's invested in Scale.ai, and they're the ones that are labeling the data, right? And they believe that's their competitive advantage. And it's also causing some disruption in the marketplace, where companies like Google are saying, hey, they may be extricating themselves from Scale.ai if Meta is buying, and there may be others. I think there's going to be a shift in the industry. So what are your thoughts around that, around what's happening with, $100 million bounties, buying up these companies, and in the ramifications of what's happening?
Yeah, I obviously being in that market and hiring, it does make it tougher. But the fact is that there's this whole rush to bring in better labeled data, and there's this whole push to train large language models on more diversified set of data, and therefore make them more capable. I think there's a lot of data out there still, and I don't think we've hit that proverbial ceiling. But again, from my perspective, we've passed that threshold of usability for large language models to be used in agents, which do have a more limited domain. But it doesn't help that in this sort of, I think, commoditization of large language models that's happening, there's this big competition for resources between the big guys, and the smaller guys and the research folks, they get left behind. And I think that's definitely not a very good thing for competition and for progress there.
Yeah, I'm going to probably say something that's probably a little unpopular, goes against the grain. But in my 30 plus years in business and et cetera, when companies are throwing money at people, it's kind of a sign of desperation, and something's wrong if you can't attract those people through your culture or whatever else. And it creates a dangerous precedent, and you may be getting the mercenaries. If you read Machiavelli or anything like that, you don't get the mercenaries, right? And you're not going to get the people that necessarily want to build a culture in your company, and for the long term, they may not. And they may be short termers in some sense, but that's just my take on it. Yeah, I think we can close out. We always want to close out with final thoughts of encouragement. So, for those that are seeking to build out in this space, what are your thoughts of encouragement for them? They're grinding it, they're trying to figure it out, they're trying to get an AI, build a company. What are your thoughts from your experience?
Yeah, I think, you might think that, all things AI is done or it's too crowded. It is not. I think that's the future. And all of us, whether we're in AI or not, are going to be AI consumers and developers. And I think there's a lot of room to come in and be creative with AI. So don't fear it. Come in and help us build a better world with AI.
Well, Babak, I can talk to you for, I think, a couple days about all this stuff AI. I've enjoyed the conversation. We're definitely coming up time. I know you're coming up on time too. So where's the best place for our listeners to learn more about Cognizant or connect with you or learn more about you?
Yeah, please come to Cognizant.com. Obviously, we are now an AI first company, and you'll find a lot about what we're doing in AI. Follow me on LinkedIn for sure. That's where I post mostly on what we do on AI. And please, if you are interested in using sort of vendor agnostic open source platform for multi-agentic systems and kicking the tires and experimenting with a lot of the concepts we talked about in the podcast, please go to GitHub, and I think we can share the link as well. And please join the community. It's fun and exciting.
Awesome. Well, everyone make sure to check out and connect with Babak Hodjat. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple. I learned a lot from this episode. Maybe I need to go get my PhD to be in this arms race for some salaries. No, just kidding. I learned a lot. Can't thank you enough for sharing your insights today. I'm your host, Sanjay Kalluvilayil, founder and CEO of Stonehaas Advisors. I hope you gained a wealth of game-changing insights, real-world insights to grow, transform, and scale to new levels and dimensions leveraging AI. I hope to see you next time.